The Song of the Earth. Before the rivers had names and the sky still bled during the hunt, the people of the Nada tribes lived between mountains of red stone. The land was sacred. Every grain of earth had its own spirit, every shadow its own will. When the sun rose, they sang to the ground. When it set, they covered their faces with ash and whispered the names of the dead. But on one night of still winds, a group of warriors defied the old custom. They crossed the Forbidden Valley, where the Earth Mother was said to sleep beneath layers of bone and clay. They sought obsidian stones to forge new weapons, for war was coming from the west, and the spirits of the forest no longer answered the shaman's calls. Among them was Monic, son of blood and thunder. His heart carried rage rather than reverence. He wanted power, to lead, to conquer. "Why should we offer our harvest to the soil?" he asked. "It gives nothing back but hunger." The elders warned him, "The land feeds those who respect it. The land devours those who wound it." But Monic laughed. They descended into the valley at dusk. The fog lay thick, carrying the smell of iron. No insects sang. No roots moved. In the center stood a rock shaped like a woman's torso, cracked by centuries of silence. Monic struck it with his axe. The echo lasted longer than any sound made by man. That night the first cry came. The ground trembled as if it were breathing. The others ran, but Monic remained, staring at the blood that began to seep from the stone. He dipped his hand in it. It was warm. "The mother bleeds," he whispered. "Then she is alive." They returned to camp without speaking of what they had seen. But the next morning, the land had changed. The rivers ran backwards. The trees leaned toward the valley. And the chant, that chant of earth and bone, began to echo through the air, even when no one was singing. The shamans gathered, burning sage and buffalo fat, trying to silence it. But the song would not stop. It came from beneath their feet. That night, Monic dreamed of a woman made of mud and blood, walking through fire. She had no face, only hollow eyes that glowed like coal. She touched his chest and whispered, "You opened me." He woke screaming. And when he looked down, his hands were covered in soil, damp, pulsing and red as flesh. The blood of the earth. The following dawn was unlike any before it. The horizon burned crimson. The wind howled with voices. The children cried without knowing why. The old shaman, Tanyu, declared that the Earth Mother had been wounded. "The valley bleeds because men have opened her womb," he said, trembling before the fire. But Monic refused to kneel. "The mother is weak," he growled. "She hides beneath the soil while we starve above it. If she wants our blood, let her come and take it." He gathered his warriors and marched toward the valley again. The fog was thicker this time, heavy as breath. At the center, where the stone woman had once stood, the ground had collapsed into a vast pit. A heartbeat pulsed from below. Monic peered into the darkness. Something looked back. A pale hand emerged, veins of clay running through it. It touched his face, cold and wet like fresh earth. The ground around him trembled. The warriors screamed, but the hand tightened its grip and dragged Monic downward. When he awoke, he was inside the pit. Roots hung like veins from the walls. The smell was of iron, soil, and decay. He tried to climb, but the walls pulsed under his hands, warm and soft, alive. Then he heard it, the chant. A voice, many voices, rising and falling like breath. "Blood of men, feed the soil. Flesh of sons, warm the womb. Return what you have taken." Monic screamed until his throat tore. But the song entered his mouth, filling him, choking him. When he crawled out of the pit hours later, he was no longer entirely human. His eyes were dark as roots, his veins black as soil. The mother had marked him. He returned to his tribe, silent, walking barefoot. Each step left a stain of red mud. When the others saw him, they fell to their knees, not in worship, but in terror. The air smelled of storm and blood. The shamans tried to cleanse him, surrounding him with smoke and chanting the names of the ancestors. But every word they uttered turned to ashes in their mouths. Monik smiled. "The mother is awake," he said, "and she is hungry." That night, the earth opened beneath their huts. From the cracks came the sound of breathing, slow, deep, ancient. The ground was no longer soil. It was flesh. The War of the Damned. The following moon rose red over the horizon, the color of coagulated blood. The Nata tribe no longer hunted. They no longer prayed. The land itself had changed. Roots grew twisted, animals were born without eyes, and the rivers whispered in the night. Other tribes began to notice the curse spreading through the valley. The Wakanai, ancient rivals of Monik, believed he had stolen the song of the Earth Mother to enslave her. Their chief, Teia, ordered an attack before the corruption reached their borders. At dawn, 70 warriors crossed the ravine armed with obsidian blades. They moved like shadows, painting their faces with clay and ashes of the dead. When they arrived at the Nod camp, they found no guards, no fire, only silence. Then they saw them. Bodies hanging from the sacred poles, the skin stretched and covered with soil as if the earth itself had molded them into offerings. The smell of rot mixed with sage smoke. Teia lifted his hand, signaling for silence. In the distance, a drum began to beat, slow, steady, from beneath the ground. The warriors stepped back, but the sound grew louder, now mixed with whispers. "Feed the soil, feed the soil." Suddenly, the ground cracked open beneath them. From the fissures burst black roots, sharp as knives, wrapping around legs and throats. Screams echoed through the canyon. Warriors slashed at the roots, but every cut only made them multiply. Teia fell to his knees, gasping as a root entered his mouth, choking him. Through the haze of dust, he saw Monik, standing among the dead, his body covered in red mud, his eyes glowing like embers. "You should have prayed," Monik said. "She listens now. And she wants more." The roots tightened, crushing bones, silencing cries. The valley drank. When the sun rose, the battlefield was gone. Only a patch of damp soil remained, pulsing faintly as if breathing. The curse had spread. The war had begun. But it was not between men anymore. It was between the living and the soil itself. The woman of clay. Night after night, Monik dreamed of her, the faceless woman of earth. She walked through his tribe, touching the huts, turning them to dust. Every step she took left flowers growing from the corpses of his people. He began to hear her even while awake, whispering through the wind, through the bones of the dead. "Bring me their hearts. The soil must drink. The balance must return." He obeyed. Monik led raids against every neighboring tribe, slaughtering without mercy. He took prisoners, but none were spared. Every body was buried standing upright, with their mouths open toward the sky. He called it feeding the mother. But the earth did not calm. The ground continued to move beneath their feet, and storms ravaged the plains. The spirits no longer answered the shamans. The night sky turned a permanent red. One evening, the old shaman Tanyu approached Monik's tent. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. "You are not serving her," he said. "You are feeding her hunger. You have made her remember her pain." Monik seized him by the throat. "The mother speaks to me," he hissed. "She chose me." "No," the old man whispered. "She cursed you." At that moment, a voice filled the air, not from the sky, not from the earth, but from within them both. It was the sound of 1,000 mothers screaming from beneath the soil. The ground split open, swallowing Tanyu whole. Monik fell backward, clutching his ears as the voice spoke again. "You opened me, son of blood. Now you will carry me." When he looked at his hands, they were no longer his. They were made of clay, damp, cracking, reshaping. His chest split, revealing veins of mud. The woman of clay was no longer a vision. She was inside him. He screamed until his lungs filled with soil. His body began to dissolve into dust and roots. By dawn, Monik was gone. In his place stood a statue of earth, eyes hollow, mouth open, and from that mouth, the chant never ceased. The Nada people fled, leaving their sacred valley behind. But the song traveled with them, buried deep in their dreams. And so, the curse of the Earth Mother began to spread, from tribe to tribe, from blood to blood. Not as a song of prayer, but as a hunger that never sleeps. The curse of the earth. Generations passed, but the story of Monik became legend, whispered only during storms, when the wind howled like a beast. The descendants of the Natu avoided the valley, calling it the mother's womb, for those who entered never returned. Yet hunger has no memory of fear. A new tribe, the Tawak, settled near the forbidden ground. They were wanderers, their herds dying from drought, their children growing weak. Their chief, Anoya, sought hope in the old tales. If the earth once gave blood, she can give life again, he said. Against the shaman's warnings, Anoya entered the valley at twilight, carrying the bones of his ancestors. He buried them in the cracked soil and sang the ancient chant, the same one that had once awakened Monik's curse. The air thickened. The wind stopped. And from the soil, a heartbeat began to rise. The others who had followed him tried to flee, but the earth beneath them softened like flesh. Their feet sank, and hands made of mud reached upward, grasping ankles, pulling them down. Anoya fell to his knees as a voice filled the valley. "You remember me?" He looked up and saw her, the woman of clay, her body covered in roots, her hair made of moss, her eyes deep as the night. She smiled, and the ground around him began to breathe. "You are her children," she said. And all children returned to the womb. The screams of the Tawak echoed through the mountains. Their bodies dissolved into the soil, their bones turning to dust. When dawn came, the valley was silent again, but greener. Flowers bloomed from the ground where they had fallen. The curse was never truly wrath. It was a cycle. The mother took life not for vengeance, but for remembrance. Every drop of blood spilled in her name fed the roots that connected the living and the dead. And when the wind blew through the trees, it carried the voices of those she had reclaimed, whispering, singing, crying for the next soul that dared to wake her again. The return of the song. Many winters later, the earth's song reached the ears of a wandering monk from the eastern lands. He was not of the tribes, his skin pale, his words foreign. But he had heard the stories of the bleeding valley and sought the truth hidden in the chants. He arrived under a storm. The sky was heavy with red lightning. The wind carried whispers that made his fire flicker and die. Still, he pressed onward until he stood in the center of the valley. There the soil pulsed. The ground itself seemed to breathe. He knelt, placing his hand on the earth. It was warm, too warm. Then he heard it, the same chant that had haunted generations. Blood of men, feed the soil. Flesh of sons, warm the womb. The monk closed his eyes and began to pray. But the earth responded, and through his prayer, the chant mixed with his words, changing them. His prayer turned into a call. His faith became hunger. The storm grew violent. Lightning struck the ground around him, and from the cracks, faces formed, the faces of men and women screaming beneath the soil. Their mouths moved with the rhythm of the chant, their eyes burning with an ancient flame. The monk realized too late, the song was not a curse. It was a language. A voice older than any god, older than the sky. It was the earth itself, speaking through the flesh of men. He fell to his knees, tears mixing with the rain. "What are you?" he cried. The voice answered, deep and slow. "I am what you bury. I am what you forget." The ground split open, swallowing him whole. When the storm cleared, nothing remained of the monk, only a new tree growing where he had stood, its bark red as blood, its leaves whispering the ancient chant. From that day on, travelers claimed to hear the song carried by the wind whenever storms approached, a warning, a memory. Those who listened too closely said they could hear the heart of the earth beating beneath their feet. And those who followed it never returned. The blood of the moon. Centuries passed, and the land changed hands. White men arrived with rifles, crosses, and iron wheels. They built their homes upon the sacred valleys, cutting the trees, digging the earth, and calling it progress. But some places refused to be tamed. The settlers who tried to live near the mother's womb began to vanish. Entire families disappeared, leaving only bloodstains and the echo of drums at night. They blamed the savages, but the tribes had long abandoned that place. No one dared to cross the valley anymore. One man, Elias Crow, a trapper known for his greed, decided to prove the legends false. He set his camp by the old river and laughed at the warnings. "There are no spirits here," he said. "Only cowards afraid of their own shadows." That night he heard the wind. But it wasn't wind, it was breathing. His fire flickered and went out. The ground beneath his boots began to pulse, a slow, wet rhythm. He drew his knife. The soil split open, and a red mist rose, carrying the scent of iron and decay. From that mist emerged a figure, a woman with no face, her body made of clay and blood, her movements slow and heavy, like roots growing through the air. Elias froze. The woman stopped in front of him. "You took what was mine," she said without a mouth. He screamed and struck with his blade, but the weapon melted in his hand like wax. The woman reached out and touched his chest. His body stiffened. Cracks appeared on his skin, and from within them, soil began to pour. His last breath came out as dust. By morning, there was no body, only a mound of earth, shaped like a man kneeling before her. The settlers who came searching for Elias found his rifle and his footprints, and then they found the mound. When they dug into it, blood poured out instead of dirt. They fled and never returned. But the stories began to spread again, of a valley that bleeds under the moon, where the soil remembers every drop spilled upon it. The Earth Mother had awakened once more, and she would never sleep again. The song that never dies. Now, when the wind howls across the plains of the forgotten West, the old ones say it carries her voice. The song of the earth, once a prayer of life, has become a song of hunger. They say that when the moon turns red, you can still hear monarchs chant echoing through the stones, the voice of the man who opened the mother's womb. Sometimes, travelers see shapes moving beneath the soil, like shadows swimming through the ground. Others claim to hear the beating of a heart when they place their ear against the earth. The tribes that remain never speak her name aloud. They offer tobacco to the wind and ashes to the ground, whispering, "Sleep, mother. Let us live." But the mother does not sleep. She listens. And sometimes she answers. In every drought, in every storm that cracks the sky, in every scream swallowed by the wind, she is there, remembering. For every tree cut, every river poisoned, every grave forgotten, she opens her eyes again. The soil breathes. The stones bleed. The wind chants. The mother is alive, and her children are endless. Some nights, when thunder rolls across the horizon, you can hear it, faint but clear, the old chant rising from beneath your feet. Blood of men feed the soil. Flesh of sons warm the womb. Return what you have taken. And if you listen too long, you might feel something beneath you, moving, pulsing, calling your name. For the Earth Mother remembers all things. She never forgives. And her song never dies.